Hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
All righty, welcome everybody to today's topic, top networking and security principles for cloud deployments. I'm excited to explore this topic with you all today because as organizations increasingly migrate to the cloud, the need for robust networking and security practices becomes ever more critical. Today's EcoCast will focus on the essential principles for designing, implementing, and managing secure cloud deployments. You'll gain insights into how to optimize network architecture, strengthen access controls, and ensure data protection across cloud environments. This will include best practices for mitigating potential vulnerabilities and safeguarding cloud-based applications, including strategies for seamless integration with existing security frameworks. And luckily, we have expert advice coming your way on today's EcoCast to achieve all the aforementioned. And I want to give you a warm welcome. My name is Mackenzie Puddesy. I am a moderator here at Actual Tech Media, and my friends and fellow moderators, Jess Steinbach, Scott Becker, and Keith Ward are here with us on live chat today. And I've got Keith mic'd up and ready to go because he's going to be joining our keynote speaker here in a minute as well. Now, if it's your first EcoCast with me, it is great to meet you, and I thank you for being here. And I just want to say we've got a questions tab here in the console. If you haven't yet found that, why don't you hop over there and give a quick hello, which many of you have done, or even more fun, since Halloween is tomorrow, I would love to know if any of you are dressing up and what you might be dressing up as. Now, of course, if you're shy, if you don't think adults should dress up, I get it. You can perhaps let us know what your children are dressing up as if you have some funny winning costumes or something like that. So again, hop over to that handouts and questions tab, and in the questions portion, say a quick hello or share your costume. Now, speaking of that same window, in the handouts tab, you will also find a link to the handouts from our speakers here at Rubrik, as well as the prize terms and conditions, which I'm going to announce in just a second as well. Alrighty, so actually I'm curious to see. Hello from the middle of nowhere, Texas. We've got somebody joining remotely in their PJs. These are not costumes, everyone, but I appreciate the input, and I still want to say a big welcome. Oh, Julie is dressing up as a bearded lady. I love this. Not dressing up, but judging kids' costumes. I think judging kids' costumes might be more fun than dressing up. So I remember as a kid, people were like, "Who are you supposed to be?" And I was like, isn't it obvious? Did I do it wrong? Anyway, happy Halloween, everyone, and let's keep this thing moving. All right, next thing I want to mention is we have got some incredibly valuable information, but we also have got some awesome prizes. Today on the EcoCast, you could win one of three $300 Amazon gift cards, and we'll be giving those away to 3 lucky winners who are here, present, and live with us at the EcoCast. And as mentioned before, you can find the full T's and C's linked in the handouts tab if you have any questions about that. And with that last little thing, I believe we are ready to rock. So to kick things off here in style, I want to welcome our keynote speaker, Dan Sullivan, who's a cloud architect, and he is joined by my fellow moderator and tech journalist, Keith Ward. So Dan, Keith, why don't you two go ahead and take it away?
Hi, everyone. It is great to be with you here today on this EcoCast. We have got an awesome event ready to go, and I'm delighted to kick it off with a discussion about top networking and security principles for cloud deployments with Dan Sullivan. Now, Dan is a cloud architect, writer, and presenter with a ton of experience in this space. Dan, welcome.
Hey, Keith. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Always a pleasure to chat with you. We have a lot of stuff to cover today, so let's dive in because we don't have a lot of time. A lot to cover and not a lot of time. Kind of a tough combination, but we're going to do our best. First question for you today. What are some tools or mechanisms for implementing network security in the cloud that we should be using?
Okay. Well, really what we want to focus on with network security when we're first thinking about the cloud is segmentation. And fortunately, we've got a number of different mechanisms we can use for that. One is called the VPC, or a virtual private cloud. So we want to think in terms of our workloads and our projects, and we want to orient those around single VPCs, or virtual private clouds. So we can organize our infrastructure for a particular workload within a virtual private cloud. Now, within a virtual private cloud, we can do further segmentation with things like subnets. So we can use firewall rules to control traffic within subnets. So, for example, if we have databases and application servers, and we want those on different segments, and we want to control traffic, then using subnets and firewall rules is one way to do that. And also, a lot of the cloud providers provide additional tools for network access control lists or security groups, where we can further limit traffic between different components within the network. So really, I'd say the VPCs, segmenting using firewall rules and subnets, and things like security groups and network access control lists are sort of go-to tools to take a look at.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, what I'm hearing from all that, Dan, is this sounds super complicated with everything you're saying here. What are some best practices that you recommend for securing access and managing identities in the cloud?
You're right. It can get complicated, and it does get complicated, but if we're methodical about it, it really helps control the complexity. With regards to identity and access management, we really want to think in terms of, first of all, the basic security principles that have been around for as long as information security, like following the principle of least privilege. So we want to make sure that people have all the permissions they need to do their job, but no more. So for that, from a management perspective, it's really important to use things like roles and define a set of roles that correspond to functions within an organization. And then we assign permissions to those roles. And then we assign people to roles, or assign roles to people or groups of people. So we want to think about how do we, what are the sets of permissions that someone's going to need to do particular tasks. So it's really important to have an identity and access management system that supports that implementation of roles, and also makes it easy to manage, and also to audit the activities that people do. So it's really important, I'd say, to follow principle of least privilege, work with an identity management system that supports authentication and authorization, as well as auditing of activities.
Okay, so you just mentioned least privilege here, and that kind of leads into the next thing I was going to ask you. That's part of, or in the same category of security that also includes zero trust architecture. Lots of folks are familiar with with zero trust as a kind of a buzzword, but can you dive into zero trust a little bit more? What is it, and why should we be concerned with it in terms of our cloud operations?
Well, see, the idea behind zero trust is that no matter how many times you might have done something like, I've made a request to an API and I'm allowed to do that, every time you make a request, anytime you do an action that is controlled, we need to actually verify your identity and you have the sufficient privileges. And oftentimes, in the past, when you might have worked on maybe a centralized system where you might have to log in, or you gain access to a network through a VPN, there was this assumption that, if you're within the perimeter, you've been given access, we can trust you. And now we no longer follow that as a practice, especially in zero trust, because we know, malicious actors can gain access to our networks, and then once they're in, that kind of model could allow them to have greater access than we would want. So with zero trust, the idea is every time you make an API call or request a certain operation, we want to make sure that you have the permissions to do that. So for example, when we work with APIs, oftentimes when we make an API call, we have to provide some kind of authentication mechanism, typically like a bearer token, which might have a lifetime of, say, a few hours or 24 hours that says, yeah, I'm allowed to call this API and do this operation or query this database. And so the idea behind zero trust is every time you make a request, you're going to basically verify that the person is allowed to do that. So we're not trusting using proxies like, oh, this person has access to the network, therefore they must be trusted. Zero trust architectures eliminates that. And so it's really a much more secure approach.
For sure. But let me ask you a related question then. It sounds like there's a lot going on behind the scenes there when you're talking about zero trust. Does it really burden your network? Does it slow down your operations a lot when you implement zero trust? Or is it just something you need no matter the impact on the network?
You know, there's definitely more work, but at the scale that we're dealing with, oftentimes with the data we deal with today, the amount of additional work, whether it's verifying tokens or calculating message digest or decrypting data, it's marginal compared to, you know, the costs that we would be incurring by trying to implement other mechanisms that give us that same level of protection. So there's definitely a trade-off, but it's like there's in physics, there's like all these rules of conservation, and computer science, it's like here's this conservation of complexity, especially in security. So, you know, if we want to shave off a few CPU cycles by not doing encryption, well, the alternatives could be much more costly. So It's definitely worth the effort, definitely around zero trust.
That's a good way to look at it. It's not just what is the upfront cost in terms of, you know, resources. What is the potential downside if you don't do it? And
Exactly.
will you have regretted not taking those zero trust measures once your company's name is in the media for a ransomware breach or something like that, right? So,
yeah, exactly. And it's hard enough, even with these best practices, there are still challenges.
100%. Okay. So let's talk a little bit then about DevOps. Okay. You've been talking about best practices. One of the best practices that people are using, it's no longer a buzzword, it's just foundational, is DevOps nowadays. So can you talk a little bit about DevOps practices that we should be considering to improve our network and security operations?
Yeah, with one of the things with, you notice moving to the cloud, say from maybe being on-prem, is that your infrastructure can be much more dynamic. You might scale things up, scale things down in its workload. And when we do that, it's really important to automate the process. So have essentially like configurations that we define in some kind of infrastructure as code, and maybe have version control over that, so that as we need to scale up resources or scale them down, we have specific configurations that we've already applied. And that really helps because then we can invest the time to make sure we've got the configuration right, it's secure, it implements whatever security controls we want, and we know we can repeatedly apply those. And so that's one thing we want to do is we want to make sure, you know, we start using infrastructure as code. We want to make sure we're doing some software engineering good practices like doing code reviews, because misconfigurations is a real source of vulnerabilities in our system.
Still.
So from a security perspective,
It's been around forever and it's still a big deal.
Yeah, we don't want to scale up our misconfiguration, so we want to be really careful about that. And again, DevOps practices and agile software development practices work really well. That's why we have DevOps. And so there are practices like that. And then also continuous monitoring and basically looking at our logs, looking at our metrics, and understanding, are there anomalies that we should be investigating? Does it look like there are people who are doing things that they really shouldn't be doing, or logging in and failing? And so not only do we want to make sure we kind of script or automate as much as possible, we want to make sure we're constantly monitoring and we're aware of anything that looks out of what we would expect and be able to investigate that. And that's where like observability tools come in.
Oh, absolutely. And part of that, of course, is knowing what you have. You can't protect what you don't have. So discovery and things like that are all crucial parts of this whole. Well, Dan, we are about out of time now. I want to thank you so much. This was great information, and it sets the table very nicely for today's EcoCast, which is all about networking and security principles for cloud deployments. Dan Sullivan, it's such a delight to talk with you every time. Thanks again for being here with us.
Thanks, Keith. It was a pleasure.
All right. And for all you attendees, you're about to have a great EcoCast, so settle in and enjoy the rest of the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you so much, Dan. I think you set the stage in a perfect way to discuss the topic at hand today. And for those of you out there in the audience, I just want to pitch you a quick poll. So the poll here is asking, what is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? And again, this could be something where, hey, I'm here today and I need to make some immediate changes. I'm looking for those changes in the next kind of 6 months. This could be something more on a year timeline, maybe a couple years, or perhaps you're not sure. You're here just to see what is new, what is happening, and keep yourself in the know so that when those changes need to be made, you're already well informed and able to do so with some background knowledge. So again, thanks for answering that poll. I'm going to leave it up for just a couple more seconds, and then I'm going to have our first speaker on out here with us. Now, today's EcoCast is short and sweet, but packed with absolutely valuable information. We have just one team presenting today other than our keynote, and they're going to be shedding light on this topic. And then we'll be giving you a little bit of extra time back in your days. So again, thanks for coming. And with that, let me welcome our presenter from our friends over at Rubrik. We've got Philip Verlooy. He's the field CTO of Rubrik X. And he is going to be talking about securing the world's data and cyber resilience. So with that, Philip, the floor is yours. Why don't you take it away?
Also on behalf of Rubrik, thank you for attending this event and spending some time with us going over protecting and securing your cloud environments. I'm Philip Verlooy, Field CTO here at Rubrik X. At Rubrik, our mission is to secure the world's data, and an ever-increasing part of that world is public cloud environments. So that's what I want to focus the majority of the session on today. Before we talk about cloud, though, let's start with this concept of cyber resilience. Cyber resilience is sort of a different mindset from focusing purely on prevention of cyber attacks to assuming the worst will happen at some point and incorporating that idea into your risk and recovery planning. Our assumption here is that cyber attacks are inevitable. People at some point will still click on the wrong things they will get through email or just find on the open web. All software, of course, has bugs, and some of these bugs are security vulnerabilities that can lead to incidents and breaches. Just think about how many times you have to update your iOS and Android apps on your phone, for example. And all software systems, they tend to break, and they tend to break all of the time, even though it's largely invisible for us as end users. A lot of these things tend to go awry and are also related to security gaps in those systems. So the question used to be not if, but when you were going to be breached or have a cyber incident in your organization. Today, the realization is really getting to not when are you going to get breached, but how many times will you potentially be a victim of this. So this assume breach mindset will potentially also remove some mental roadblocks and allow you to focus on bouncing back successfully and bouncing back better, building up your, let's say, cybersecurity and cyber resiliency capabilities to safeguard your organization and to continue to run your business on a day-to-day basis. Now, these changing environments, the way that we build our architectures, think about, going from largely on-prem to adopting hybrid cloud to, now multi-cloud and bringing in a lot of SaaS applications, is also leading to changing behaviors from a malicious actor perspective. These stats, they come from the latest IBM X-Force Threat Intelligence Index for 2024. Where they noticed a 71% year-on-year increase in cyber attacks using stolen or compromised credentials. So this is fast becoming the biggest attack factor, especially when it comes to cloud environments, is these malicious actors. They're not sort of hacking into your system, they're not breaking in, they're effectively logging in using valid credentials, which becomes very difficult for existing security tools to evaluate at that point, and that's why they're sort of largely successful. About 32% of cyber incidents today involve some sort of data theft or data leakage event as well. So if you combine that with regulatory pressure around reporting towards regulators and so on what type of data was impacted, what type of potentially personal information you lost from your customers, you can see that this is increasing the pressure quite a bit on a lot of organizations. And then 84% of critical infrastructure incidents took place where the initial access factor could have been mitigated by implementing things like least privilege control on identities, for example. Again, if we look at sort of the technical part of least resistance for these malicious actors or these threat actors, it's quite clear that instead of going after these perimeter controls, or maybe even taking a more esoteric part and going after your IoT devices, it's easier for them to either use some sort of phishing campaign. They would still need to some extent compromise the device of that user that clicks on that phishing link. Whereas the easiest part right now would be to use credentials. The way that they get those credentials can be fairly easy. Either you find credentials, posted on things like, a GitHub repository or a paste bin or something like that, especially when it comes to things like API keys and so on. But there's, of course, people who offer you those valid credentials on, avenues like Telegram and others. One example would be Redline Stealer, very successful malware, easily available, able to not only harvest things like saved credentials, but also active cookies, making it fairly straightforward for these malicious actors to not only get in, but to maybe even subvert things like multi-factor authentication and so on. So once they have this valid account, this compromised account, they will start to laterally move around in your environment, get to a more privileged account with more permissions, and that's typically how they will get to your data. They will either steal your data or they will encrypt your data, and in a lot of the cases, if not the majority of the cases today, we see it's actually even a combination of both. So they have two shots at getting you to pay the ransom and release the data back to you. Now, if you think about data that's been encrypted in the cloud or even on-prem, once you have a decryption key, or maybe you have a nice immutable backup solution, you can get your data back quite easily. But data that has been stolen, that tends to be gone forever, right? So if the genie's out of the bottle, you can't get it back in. And you have to trust that malicious actor that if you pay the ransom, they will actually not leak your data on the dark web. And we've seen enough evidence now that these people are very scrupulous, and some of them will just leak your data in any case. So the goal is to figure out a way to minimize the potential impact of a data exfiltration while still assuming that it can happen. So that's nicely fitting into our sort of cyber resilience assume breach mindset, let's say. Now, if you think about data growth, so where is the majority of the new data being created? That's, of course, in the cloud and in SaaS applications. So these figures are from our previous Rubrik Zero Labs report, which you can freely get from the Rubrik website as well. But what we saw there is that 20% of the new data is created on premises, but that's far outpaced by the cloud and SaaS. So 73% of new data is created in the public cloud and 145% in SaaS applications. The way to think about that is, I think, if you look at where are people experimenting, where is innovation happening, that's typically in the cloud or from a SaaS sort of perspective. So those data locations, they become the most interesting attack surface for malicious actors. They tend to dig where there's the most chance to hit gold, and the most chance to hit gold these days is in the cloud and in SaaS, as it turns out. Moving to the cloud also brings with it some security blind spots, especially if you think about using existing security tools and sort of lifting and shifting them into the cloud together with your workloads. There's certain things those tools aren't sort of prepared for. So our latest Rubrik Zero Labs pointed out that 70% of all data in a typical cloud instance is actually object storage. So that's vastly different from on-prem environments, where it will be mostly file and block based storage. But of that data, more than 25% of all object stores, they do contain data covered by regulatory or legal requirements. So, PII information or HIPAA type information, PCI information from a financial perspective, and so on. And that type of data is much more valuable to an attacker because if, they know that if they have that type of information and they threaten to leak it, you're much more likely to pay a ransom because it's so much more impactful for you as an organization as well. And then looking at public cloud and SaaS, they are the leading attack surfaces today. Again, that's where that type of data can be exfiltrated. So that's going to be the first target for these malicious actors. And similarly to how it has always been in security, but especially true for multi-cloud now, you cannot secure what you cannot see. So getting visibility on those data assets would be step one. So all of that leads to some cloudy prospects, I would say. The weather is not super clear in the cloud, so there's more and more criminals, more and more malicious users. Again, they're targeting where sort of the biggest chance of success lies. We've seen a lot of examples in the public now around ransomware and ransomware payments and the monetary impact not only the cleanup operation has, but also things like impact on your organization at large and how you deal with that. Cloud environments, of course, are creating a larger and larger attack surface. There's more exposure, so you have more things to defend now, especially if you go multi-cloud and SaaS. All of these things have their own unique entry paths and services that you now have to understand and protect. And maybe your IT staff isn't prepared for that, but also maybe your existing tooling isn't really prepared for that either. Mentioned before as well, but there's more and more regulatory pressure, especially things like DORA, for example, in finance. And then if you happen to be based in Europe, we are now dealing with the NIS2 regulation, where not only these fines are getting quite substantial, but they also include, let's say, holding company leadership and holding board members to certain cybersecurity standards, and if they sort of can't adhere to those standards, they will be held liable in some of these cases potentially. Then, if you think about adopting cloud, adopting multi-cloud, there's always the chance of performing some misconfiguration leading to, for example, publicly exposed cloud storage and cloud buckets and so on. But even the cloud provider itself isn't free of those things, right? There was a recent example where Google Cloud wiped out an entire customer environment, including their HA setup and including their Google-based backup, so they had to rely on a third-party backup vendor to get their data back. These things, they happen sometimes, so we sort of have to prepare for that. In terms of insiders, there's always going to be people who leave your organization. There's always going to be disgruntled employees to some extent, and they might take some of that sensitive information with them. There's even malicious actors now targeting some of these insiders to give them an easy path to the inside and sort of help them get to their ultimate goal, which is to get to your data. And then finally, I would say there's more and more nation states or more and more APTs active as well. An interesting one I saw from a couple of weeks ago was this joint statement from the NSA and the Five Eyes, saying that Russian cyber spies are also adapting their techniques from going from on-prem targets to more and more cloud-hosted environments. Again, that's where the chances of success are highest, unfortunately. So how do we address this? If you think about this very high-level, let's say, logical attack path or kill chain, the idea is we can focus on preventing a breach from happening, but we also need to take into account that it will still happen. Like incidents will still happen. So the ultimate goal is how do we make sure that an incident, i.e. maybe somebody gets credentials, is able to log into your environment, doesn't turn into a breach. And if it does turn into a breach, how do we minimize the impact of that breach? So the way that we look at it from a Rubrik perspective is we work on, first of all, production data at rest, meaning the data does not have to be managed through Rubrik. It's just sitting in your public clouds. It's sitting in your SaaS environments. And that is where we will employ our data security posture management technologies. So we look at things like data hygiene, minimizing the amount of data that you have, especially when it comes to sensitive data. So think about having copies of data spread around your environment, typically for dev test purposes. Some of those data assets contain sensitive information. So they're just as valuable to a malicious user as non-copies of data, as actual production data. So if that data isn't used actively, maybe you haven't touched it for a long period of time, why is it still there? So why are you paying the cloud provider to store it? And why are you sort of exposing that sensitive data to a potential breach? So finding that access data, that road data, let's say, and getting rid of it, either by actually deleting it or at least removing access to it, can go a long way in making sure the incidents don't turn into breaches. Then we have to implement the least privilege access principle. So the idea is, do we understand how identities are linked to data exposure on the back end, and can we then implement right sizing for those identities? Instead of overexposing and just giving full access permissions on anything, can we make sure that we only provide credentials with the access that they need to actually perform their day-to-day operations? And if they need more access at a certain point in time, we provide just-in-time sort of access and extend those credentials. So getting visibility on what that looks like will help you greatly in right-sizing these permissions and these privileges. Then the third thing that we look at is assessing data posture. So each and every cloud has different security capabilities. You can, turn on encryption, you can turn on logging for an S3 bucket in AWS, for cloud storage in GCP, and so on. But validating that you've actually implemented this across the board becomes troublesome. So the idea here is that we'll allow you to build policies that determine the baseline of security that you expect from your multi-cloud. And then Rubrik DSPM will go out and validate that that posture is still set and help you tweak that in if needed. Then understanding the blast radius of accounts. So if people get access to a higher privileged account, what data would they be able to target, for example, and making sure we minimize that. And then finally, detecting anomalous behavior. So the whole idea of understanding how data is being used in your environment, and then seeing these outliers, anomalous activity in your environment, somebody downloading sensitive data to their laptop for the first time ever, somebody accessing, sensitive information from a strange location around the world where you have no branch offices, for example, things like that we can monitor for and then help you implement the correct controls. So again, all of that happens before you have a copy of the data that's associated with Rubrik. So that's purely working on data at rest. And then, of course, we still have this concept of, well, what if the worst happens? What if my data gets destroyed or encrypted and I need to get back into production as quickly as possible? That's where our backup data stored in an immutable fashion, i.e. the Rubrik Security Cloud capabilities through Rubrik Cloud Native Protection come in. So we'll help you pinpoint the latest and greatest, let's say, safe copy of the data that wasn't impacted by any malware, help you restore it as quickly as possible, understand the impact in your environment. And if you do not want to sort of do this on your own, we do have the Rubrik ransomware recovery team to help you with that. Again, our assumption here is that stress might be high when you're going through an active ransomware recovery scenario. And if you can rely on this great bunch of people who have done it multiple times for customers all around the world and have sort of a standard process, they will guide you through that. That will help a lot. Now, all of these solutions aren't point products that you have to individually implement. They're actually integrated nicely into what we call the Rubrik Security Cloud. So depending on your specific use case, if it's cloud data protection or if it's more data security posture management, they all come together in the Rubrik Security Cloud and can be consumed as a SaaS product from our Security Cloud services. It all starts, I would say, with this difference in philosophy when we think about how do we implement this and how do we have our customers consume this. So there's a difference in philosophy in that we want to make this extremely simple. The way that you operate is very centralized. You work on the basis of what we call an SLA domain or an SLA policy, and you can apply that policy across the multi-cloud and across SaaS and even on-prem environments. Whereas if you look at individual cloud providers, they typically do not think in this solution manner. They really offer you building blocks to build something yourself. And even if you think about a single cloud provider, that single backup solution, for example, that they will offer you is not valid across their entire estate either. So there's a lot of, let's say, things that you sort of have to manually connect together and manually figure out what is the best way forward here. So at a high level, why is this so difficult from a cloud perspective to secure and recover data? So first thing, of course, is lack of visibility and control of your growing data environment, which is a direct result of adopting more and more cloud services, of course. So you have PaaS, SaaS services. Some of these things have sensitive data in them. Some of that data is important from a regulatory requirement. You have your internal teams, let's say, with their internal tools. Some of them aren't really fit for purpose when it comes to cloud, but all of them have different expectations and different requirements when it comes to these environments as well. So then it becomes really difficult to uniformly understand if something happens in your environment, let's say a ransomware attack, can we even recover from a ransomware across all of these environments? And can we actually prove that out? Like, how do we make sure that this is effective when that time inevitably happens in our environment? So even with cloud native backup tools, it's going to be challenging to get a baseline copy of a backup across all of your services. It's operationally quite complex, and especially when it comes to things like visibility, compliance, reporting, that's going to be really hard to implement across cloud. Then a backup is only as good as the recovery capabilities that it provides, essentially. So if you think about recovery being quite manual in the public cloud, not super performant, missing things like single file recovery and so on, that becomes a challenge. And then finally, the cost the lack of cost optimization, I should say, in the public cloud, because there's a lack of storage tiering, there's a lack of compression and deduplication, there's multiple clouds needing multiple tools. These all play into a higher cost and a higher TCO at the end of the day. If you then multiply this with multiple accounts across multiple clouds, that problem becomes sort of worse and worse and worse, especially then if you also need to think about a hybrid environment and SaaS solutions at the same time. So again, we unify all of this. We provide these capabilities across multiple clouds, but also across multiple stakeholders in the environment. So what that looks like then is we give you the capability to gain data visibility and control across those cloud environments. So understand the data that you have in the environment, then understand if it's protected in the right way, all from the same SaaS platform. We'll drive down the exposure, so we'll reduce the data theft potential in your environment. Then we'll allow you to confidently back up and restore all of the data across multi-cloud and SaaS, and all done again with a lower TCO potentially in mind. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for attending our session. If there's any questions, happy to take any email or reach out to me on x.com. I'm Philip V there, but happy to chat to you guys a bit more about our cyber resiliency capabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. That was absolutely fantastic. I think, we got quite a few questions out there from the audience who are curious about Rubrik, about what you had to say. Now, unfortunately, we won't have Philip sticking around for a live Q&A session. So any of those questions that you sent in, do not fret. The team at Rubrik will definitely field all those questions with you today, tomorrow, or in the near future as they follow up and make sure you get any information you need. And if you are looking for some additional information, well, you can answer this poll here and think of this as your wish list, your easy button, your shopping order. If you want data sheets, white papers, case studies, pricing, a demo, whatever you might have there, feel free to fill that in and we'll make sure that you get exactly what you're looking for when you like it. With that, I also want to remind you that in the handouts tab, you have got a link there from Rubrik. This is a link to their white paper. So if you want to download it, it is the Rubrik Security Cloud, the trusted data security solution for cyber recovery. And they'll be covering why legacy backup is untrustworthy for cyber recovery, why data security is the trusted approach to cyber recovery, and also a little bit about Rubrik Security Cloud and its component services. So this will be a perfect way to follow up on the convo we just had with Philip. And of course, you might want to keep it for safekeeping if you're planning to do some tech implementations or updates in your IT department at your organization in the next 6, 12, or 24 months, as we talked about kind of today at the beginning of today's webinar. With that, I am going to take this poll down in just a second. So call out for that is your last chance to click away. And we're going to wrap things up here with not 1, not 2, but 3 Amazon gift cards to give away. Quick reminder, you do need to be live and present on today's webinar to win. And with a little drum roll on your desks or countertops, wherever you may be today, here are our lucky winners. First and foremost, we have Chris Clark from Utah. Congratulations, Chris. We have the second gift card going out to Jeff Ostentowski from Nebraska. And the third and final going out to Amber Welpley from Texas. Again, quick recap. We have Chris Clark from Utah, Jeff Ostentowski from Nebraska, and Amber Welpley from Texas. Huge congrats, you three. And as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prizes after today's webinar. Now, if you are on today's webinar and you have been enjoying yourself and you're thinking, hey, maybe I want to present on a webinar or I want to sponsor a webinar, well, we would absolutely love to talk to you. If that is the case, you can reach out at connect@actualtechmedia.com and talk about having you get involved with an upcoming EcoCast, MegaCast, or summit in the future. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank all of our speakers from Rubrik, as well as Dan Sullivan from our keynote for making this EcoCast possible and for being here with us today. And I want to give a special thank you to all of you for attending and asking some great questions. Thank you for those of you who answered my Halloween question. Good luck on your bearded lady out there. I had so much fun talking with you all about that, but also, more importantly, about networking and security principles for cloud deployments. I hope you've all gotten some interesting ideas and tips, and maybe you're even feeling kind of lit up and excited and ready to take some next steps. So if you have enjoyed your time and wish to check out an upcoming MegaCast, well, mark your calendars actually for the same time tomorrow. Perhaps this is your lunch if you're in Eastern time, and a great way to learn a little bit more about what's going on in the industry. Again, this is a MegaCast entitled Next Generation Endpoint Management and Protection Solutions and Strategies. That is tomorrow, Thursday, October 31st at 12 p.m. Eastern or 9 a.m. Pacific. I hope to see you all there. And if not there, I hope to see you all again on a webinar soon. And until then, I hope you have an absolutely magical rest of your day. Take care.